Good morning, and once again, welcome to Great Tree Women's Zen Temple's Saturday morning lecture series. First, we'd like to invite Tejo to do the opening sutra.
An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
And now a short message on the dana. I have put the Reverend's information in the chat. If you can't see it, I will re-enter it. Thank you.
In Buddhism, when practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity, or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana are to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. And as Lorna mentioned, the address for dana should be in the chat. If you don't see that, please let me know and I will get that for you. Thank you.
Our speaker this morning is the Reverend Issan Koyama, and he is a Buddhist priest and disciple of Shohaku Okumura Roshi. He is originally from Japan and came to the U.S. as a newspaper and TV journalist. In the early years of the AIDS epidemic, Issan volunteered for an end-of-life care in New York City and subsequently became a professional caregiver. While working as a full-time hospice chaplain in the U.S., Issan established and managed a residence and medical facility in Japan that hosted geriatric and palliative patients as well as family clinic. His work was featured in both American and Japanese mainstream media, such as the New York Times, Asahi Shimbun, NPR Morning Edition, and the StoryCorps book callings. Welcome, Reverend.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Issan. The best way to remember is automobile Nissan without the N at the beginning, Issan. I'm somebody who divide my time both in Japan and USA for the last 40 years. I technically immigrated to the United States in Japan, but because of my work, most of the years I spent half of the year in Japan, half of the year in the United States. And in the United States, my teacher is a Shohaku Okumura Roshi, whose home I'm actually staying right now. Okumura Roshi actually offered wonderful sets of lecture series on Dogen's Chinese poem, hosted by you in summer. And so you probably remember this background from his Zoom filming. And I'm on my way actually back to New York, then to Japan. So this is such a wonderful, timing that I was asked to come in to speak with you. And I really appreciate that, Tejo-san. Thank you very much. It's really nice to see new sets of group of people. So if you have seen the flyer announcement at the beginning, some of you must have thought, why is he talking about Angulimala? Particularly because, this was under the context of, I spoke with Tejo-san, and Tejo-san told me one of the major themes of the lecture series of Great Tree this season is, of course, Precepts. And it is of course related with our celebration of 100th year of a Soto school in the United States. And Teijo-san is going to Los Angeles very soon to participate in this grand ceremony for precepts giving and also precepts lecture series. And of course, Angulimala is a serial killer. So what's the connection between Angulimala and this theme of precepts? You might have thought about that. You know, Angulimala is mala. Some of you probably have this, those, you know, beads connected into the ring. So in this case, mala is actually necklace, and anguli is a finger. So this is the guy who kept on killing people and cut the piece of the hand, which is a finger, and then connected it and wore it around the neck. So therefore, people feared this serial killer and nicknamed him as Angulimala. Of course, there are a few reasons why I wanted to talk about this. Number one, actually, there are three reasons. Number one, when I became a disciple of Okumura Roshi, I asked him to somehow suggest to me how I personally should keep on studying Dharma. And one of the things he really emphasized was it is very important for us, not just me, to keep on studying ancient Buddhism, the original text, to understand what Gautama Buddha, I really like to call Buddha as a Gautama Buddha instead of Shakyamuni Buddha because it's academically a little more accurate. So when I say Gautama Buddha, please know I'm talking about the historic Buddha. What the Gautama Buddha taught, how it connects with what the Dogen teaches. And it's kind of interesting to actually keep studying, and then you really see this complete in syncness with what the Dogen's talking about several thousand years after, and what the oldest text we have, notably, that's supposed to be something Gautama Buddha said. So I'm kind of fascinated by this. And another reason is in this 100th year anniversary in Zen Shuji in Los Angeles, I believe some of you are actually participating and receiving precepts as well. The official precepts giving ceremony, we need three teachers. One teacher is the one who actually gives the precepts. Another one is a bit like a ringmaster who walks you through the whole process. And another teacher is called the Sekkyoshi. And he is the guy, or she is the guy who gives you the lecture series of what exactly precepts it's about. In this 100th year anniversary, Okumura Roshi is that lecturer. Now, this kind of ceremony actually takes place annually in our main monastery in Japan, Eiheiji. And in Eiheiji, for quite some time, we had a most favorite lecturer whose name was Nara Roshi, Nara Kosei Roshi. Nara Kosei Roshi unfortunately died in year 2017 because of his old age. He was 89 years old. But he was the previously he was the head of Komazawa University, which is the Buddhist university of Soto school. Most of those Japanese teachers you know historically are graduates from Komazawa University. And Nara Roshi was the principal of Komazawa University. Also, he was the lecturer when 100 people, or dozens of 100 people, come to Eiheiji annually and receive precepts. So we really loved what he said. So after he died, we put his lecture series recorded and transcribed, put that into edited book, and it just came out shortly before pandemic. And of course I got it. And then in that book, Nara Roshi actually talks about the Angulimala Sutta. It's one of the typical sutta, which really explains the quality of this precept. This precept is not a Vinaya, but Sila. What exactly precepts is about and how we practice with it. So I'm kind of following his route. So that's why I'm presenting Angulimala. And I also like to offer you Angulimala is a relatively larger sutra, so I can't do this today entirely, but some highlights of Nararoshi connected with Precepts and Angulimala Sutra, and also Dogen's teaching. And another thing, the third reason is, most of us, I'm in the middle of a baby boomer. I'm a medium age of baby boomer. I'm 67 years old. I was born in 1955. Most of us in Japan are under the huge influence of two really important Soto school Buddhist teacher, Kodo Sawaki, homeless Kodo, you probably know by his nickname, and Uchiyama Roshi. They were most definitively influential Buddhist teacher in our age in 20th century. And then, as you know, Okumura Roshi is the youngest disciple of Uchiyama Roshi. So Uchiyama Roshi for me is my Dharma grandfather. Uchiyama Roshi often said, Buddhist text is like a life book of life. It has like so many thousands of life stories, and it is really true. On the surface, many of the texts sound so arcane, but if you really learn how to read Buddhist text, it is really a collection of life stories. So Uchiyama Roshi often said, when he encounters some sort of challenges in his life, he often opens Buddhist texts. Of course, we have like thousands of Buddhist texts. So we kind of have to just decide what my finger reaches, just put out and open randomly. Then it offers you some sort of life story. And some life stories, depending on where you are in your life, doesn't really hit you very well. But sometimes you're going through and you feel, oh my goodness, they're talking about me 2000 years ago. So I often do that too. When I have some sort of questions about my life, my teacher is not the type of the teacher I bring my life story to, but and I don't want to do that anyway. My life is my life. I take care of my life. So when I have my life questions, I usually rely on Buddhist text. And Angulimala, even though I am not the serial killer, I read this text more like a metaphor. And then I find a lot about me in this text. So that's why I wanted to read this text a little bit within the limitation of the time today with you guys. So if you like to get a hold of the text, I believe it is offered online for free. Technically speaking, all those life stories in Pali Canon in ancient Buddhism, there are so many versions because it's not just one version, but it is also written in this book and that book and this book, that book. So today I'm going to offer a combined story, but probably the most comprehensive one is shows up in Majjhima Nikaya. Majjhima Nikaya is a middle-length text among Pali Canon's Sutra collection. And Majjhima spells as M-A-J-J-H-I-M-A, Majjhima Nikaya, N-I-K-A-Y-A. And then out of the collection of middle-length Majjhima Nikaya sutras, it's number 86, Angulimala. You know the spelling of Angulimala from the flyers from the temple. So who's Angulimala? Angulimala originally, of course, named differently. And he was born in Brahman caste. In Gautama Buddha's time, as you probably know very well, India had a 4 major caste system. And then below the 4 caste system, there's an untouchable. And within each caste system, it was subdivided into sometimes more than 100 different systems. And Brahma basically is on the top of the caste system. So he comes from a very hybrid, almost like a blue blood kind of caste. And he was a very skillful, smart, young, and also kind of masculine, tall, dark and handsome, the typical case. And then he was also very serious for his spiritual growth. And Gautama Buddha at the time in northern India is a bit like, I don't know the exact example right now, but it is the time all of these small nations started to arise, and then also connecting routes was also made. So therefore, trading was really active, and many of those nations really started to flourish economically. When we are satisfied economically, our attention tends to go into our mind and spirituality. So this is the time of yet another time of golden era of Indian history. There are lots of spiritual practice started to be born. So this man was attracted to one specific, this is not the Gautama Buddha's group to start with, of course. There were so many new religions around that time. And he was attracted by one of the religious group, and he started to study under this particular teacher. And this particular teacher really liked this man. I'm just going to call him as Angulimala so that it has a consistency. And then Angulimala basically became like a right-hand person of this wonderful spiritual teacher. There was a problem. This wonderful spiritual teacher had a young, beautiful wife. And then when this spiritual teacher was on the tour, like, you know, Teijo-san goes on the tour, like next time she's going to Los Angeles, and Okumura Roshi goes to this and that. Right now, it's a little limited because of the pandemic, but you know how teachers used to function. So this teacher was also on the tour. And then his house was basically maintained by number one disciple, Angulimala. And then this young wife was really attracted to Angulimala and tried to seduce him. And of course, Angulimala is a very serious spiritual guy, and he really starts to, you know, no, I don't like to get involved with that type of dynamism. So she gets really angry and she gets jealous. So on that day, the teacher came back home. She intentionally tore her own clothes and made herself look very disarrayed, and cried and went to his husband and said, Angulimala tried to violate her. So he gets angry and he feels a little vengeful. He means Angulimala's teacher. And then his teacher tells Angulimala, your enlightenment process is almost up to the completion point, but there's one thing you have to do. It's a bit like a Teijo-san, it's almost like before transmission, you have to sew the sets of brown robes and etc. etc. But in this case, it's a trick. And then he says, to complete your enlightenment process, you have to kill 100 people. And each time you kill the person, you take a piece of finger and collect it to prove that you really killed 100 people. This, of course, is a trick because, of course, while he's going to do that, he will be, you know, criminal, and he will most possibly be hated by people. And of course, you know, captured and arrested and put into the prison, and most possibly capital punishment. So, but the Angulimala, being such a serious and naive man, he actually thought it was something he really had to do. And of course, at the beginning, it was really strange and awkward and frightening. But again, it's a bit like a system of, you know, addiction starts to happen. At the beginning, you are afraid and just vaguely curious, but for some reason or another, some connections, it's a very strange connection, put you into some particular place, and you are almost inevitably start to get involved with that. So again, this is almost like a metaphor of many experiences we get in. So he starts to kill 2, 3, 4, goes on and on and on. By doing so, his whole demeanor starts to change. He starts to look really frightening. he's still young and masculine and beautiful, but there's this really dark look he starts to acquire. And then depending on the book, sometimes Pali Canon tends to have this addition over and over and over. Some story becomes so magnified. So some portion of the Pali Canon says 1,000 instead of 100, but I like to stay on 100. And then he killed up to 99 people. And then there, the story of Gautama Buddha interrelating his path starts to happen. Now, there's two different versions of the stories, and I kind of like the first version. The first version is that he killed 99 people, and in the town he was in, he just somehow strangely came back to his hometown, and he remembered his mother was living alone in the house. So he thought, that's it, I'm going to kill my mother. I think this is more symbolic. It's almost like a Greek, mythological way. It's very symbolic and psychological. And I think it's kind of clever that 2,500 years ago, Indian folks actually came up with this story. Another story is, of course, this was coincidentally where Gautama Buddha was hosted. This was a Kosala country called Kosala. Country of Kosala was headed by a specific king who was really fond of Gautama Buddha, and he was almost like a student of Gautama Buddha. So Gautama Buddha heard the story. Maybe it's a combination, I don't know. So one day, Angulimala is walking on the street, and there's Gautama Buddha catches Gautama Buddha's figure, and then he feels, okay, I'm going to kill him now. Then that makes 100 instead of a mother. Former book says Gautama Buddha knew that, so he wanted to save Angulimala's mother, and also killing their parents is a really major crime. So therefore, he also wanted to save Angulimala too, maybe so. And then he tries to run. Angulimala starts to run so that he can catch Gautama Buddha to kill. But even though Gautama Buddha is really slowly walking, like King walking, and then Angulimala tries to very go fast, he just can't catch it. And then he gets so frustrated. All this is very symbolic, and all of this. And then he says, he gets so frustrated, and he says, stop to Gautama Buddha. And then Gautama Buddha turns around, and this is one of my favorite portion. He stopped and called out to the blessed one, Gautama Buddha, stop, recluse, stop, recluse. And then Gautama Buddha said, this is a very famous line, you might have heard about that. I have stopped, Angulimala. Now you stop too. Well, there's always some sort of timing. In our life, I was born in this town called Kamakura. You might have heard about the Kamakura Buddhism or Kamakura era. This is the era in Japanese history. Dogen was born, and also Buddhism was basically retranslated from some sort of religion for upper class aristocrat to everybody. It was a democratization of Buddhist teaching in Japanese history. And then the reason why this era of the history is called Kamakura is that Kamakura was the ancient capital of that time. So I was born in this country, town called Kamakura, and Kamakura is a smallish town, but it's just completely filled in with the Buddhist temples and monasteries. We actually have 5 major monasteries of Rinzai school in just 1 or 2 small canyon. So I grew up in a very heavy influence of Buddhist teaching, and I have heard many of those stories as a young man. Yeah, of course, this story about Angulimala says, stop, Gautama Buddha, and Gautama Buddha turns around and just coolly say, I have stopped, now you stop. But I really didn't understand this until many, many years later. There's so many other very strong, almost decisive one-liner teaching in Buddhist teaching. We learn it. Sometimes it just means nothing. But for some reason or another, something happens in your life. This really comes to you and you feel, oh, that's what it means. In my case, I'm kind of slow. So not like this Angulimala, who I guess Angulimala was really spiritual man, and he really studied spirituality. So he probably understood what Gautama Buddha immediately, because in this story, Angulimala really stops and thinks, and there's something really takes over him. And he just kneels down in front of Gautama Buddha, and then Gautama Buddha take him in, and Angulimala becomes Gautama Buddha's student. And they start to actually practice together. But I wasn't like Angulimala. It took me so many years. In 1983, I came to New York City working for American-owned international media company. And then they sent me to New York to work in their headquarters. And then our office building was in the middle of Greenwich Village. And then my category of the work as the journalism was, I was reporting arts, entertainment, and lifestyle, which eventually included fashion. So I wasn't really into any kind of like really hardcore, like climates, politics, etc., economics. I was really more into, fun genre of the reportery. But the interesting thing was this was 1983, downtown New York, and its artist community. And what happened was it became the major center of early AIDS epidemic. So what happened was almost each year I keep trying to update my business contacts. I know many of you are much younger than I am, so you probably don't remember this, but we used to use something called Rolodex. We wrote down all of those forms. Now we have all of these. You don't even remember your phone numbers, but we have to write down all of these address and phone numbers into card, and there was a roller. So at the end of the year, I usually take a little time like, oh, maybe I don't need this card. Well, maybe I don't need this card. And each year, it started to accumulate up to 25% of my business contacts, friends are gone because of this AIDS epidemic. Artist community in New York was really hardest hit at the beginning. So in 1985, someone called me, and then this lady said, I wasn't Issan at that time. I was Koyama or Issan, sorry, Hajime. And she said, Hajime, there was somebody you might know is in trouble, and he's in a hospital, but he's so sick and he can't speak and can't communicate. And his mother came over from Japan, but his mother doesn't speak a word of English. So can you go and volunteer as a translator? So I did go. And then it just turned out the address I received was one of those AIDS ward. In those days, most of the American hospitals, particularly in larger cities, started to have a huge portion dedicated to AIDS patients. In this hospital, it's kind of strange, 20 years after that, this was the hospital I ended up working in, used to have this huge AIDS ward. And then I go in, and then, at that time, there was so much misinformation. As a matter of fact, we didn't know any information to start with. So the doctors are so stressed out and angry. And then he said to me, oh, okay, all right, you're a volunteer, you're translating. There's this smallish woman in the room. This is isolation unit. We assume this is his mother, and tell her she has to buy 2 tickets, maybe 3 tickets, air tickets right away, and bring him back immediately to Japan because he has AIDS and he's going to die anyway. It is really the matter of there's nothing we can do. It is really the choice between, do you want to die here? Do you want to die in your home? So tell her. that was my first order I received from the doctor. So I go to the this isolation room, and in front of the door there's a whole bunch of caution. You have to wear this, you have to wear that, you have to wear this, and you have to wear this, you have to wear all these guards. And then there was, this is a true story. It's kind of frightening story. I'm really glad we don't have to go through this anymore. But this is 1983, 85. There were 3 trays of meal, untouched, placed directly on the floor because none of the caregivers, nurses are willing to get into the room. They were so afraid. So I really felt, wow, this is really awful. I really didn't have much medical information at that time, but one thing I knew was if you want to speak to somebody nicely, you can't speak that with all these guarding system. You can't really show your emotion if you are covering all of that. So I decided, well, let's ignore it. And I opened the door, and then I started to speak with this older lady and this young man, and he turned out to be one of the first 3 reported cases of AIDS patients in Japan afterward. But at that time, there was a really strong sense of stop, because I was involved with this particular job for, by that time, like 7 years. I started out in 1978. But I was really starting to question myself because this is really about almost like a promoting eternal sense of beauty, youth, sexiness, etc., etc. And then while I'm doing that, spending 8 hours in my day, working on that, I'm really looking at all these young and beautiful men and women starting to shrivel up and die. So there was a very strong sense of dilemma within me. So this was when I opened the door, I really kind of hit this point of, oh, this is what stop means. Stop. You really don't have to get involved with the cyclic motion of, I have to go to a good school so that I can graduate with a good score so that I can get into this good company. And then while I get into the company, I work very hard and I do this and do that. And then my salary is and I'm going to get this credit from this magazine and this newspaper. And I get more and more. It was almost like addiction, so to speak. And I also understand later on, I ended up working with the people who has addiction problem a lot, but I really understood how this systematic, cyclic motion really starts to happen. So in many senses, this line in Angulimala Sutta is so interesting. About 10 years later, this is 1993, I was already starting to make a transition from former job to hospice caregiver. But on the process of that, I had this incredible experience. I had this friend I used to live with, and then he left my place, and then he was living with somebody else, and then he got infected with HIV. And this is, again, way before treatment was invented. And he came back to me and asked me, he's getting really sick, so he can't work anymore. And all of his family members and relatives are so afraid of him coming in, and he has no place to live. So he was wondering if I could take him as my roommate. At that time, I still had quite a large apartment because of the remnants of past work. So I said yes. I probably didn't think through when I said yes, but it was almost automatic response. But I have to tell you, the next 2 years was like a hellish experience. And then in 1993, at the beginning of the year, he received a 6-month prognosis. And on that day, he was hospitalized in Sloan Kettering Memorial Cancer Center, which is one of the nation's leading cancer center in Manhattan, which was offering many of those very, very difficult trial medication, which is very difficult on your body. But he was really trying and trying and trying, and he took the last option, which failed. So his doctor told me, you really have to take him back, and he's going to die within 6 months. And then on that day, I was with my dear friend. Teijo-san is going to work with her in Zenshuji. Her name is Pat Enkyo-hara. She ended up becoming a founder of some Zen organization called Village Zendo in New York. But at that time, she was just a Pat for me. And she was a wonderful, supportive lady who lives in the neighborhood. And her best friend had recently died of AIDS. So she was really supportive to the people around. So she came with me to the hospital. And then I come outside from the doctor's office. And then I'm starting to vent. I vent and vent and vent. Because, if you become a sole caregiver of someone who's dying, you end up getting involved in all of those problems this person had, but never really dealt with. He came from a very, very difficult family background, very homophobic, racist, etc., etc. And so therefore, each family members and some of his close friends started to scream out of their own, opinions and etc., etc. So some people would tell me, no, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be doing this, etc., etc. Some people wants to come in to take out his possession in advance before he dies because this is valuable, etc. All these very egocentric issues just come. So I'm really starting to vent about this and vent about her, vent about him, and etc. etc. And at that time, Enkyo listens very, gently. And then when I somehow this venting energy kind of subsides, she very gently said, but Issan, your job is not only taking care of, this man's name was Raymond, not only Raymond, but your job is to take care of everybody. Again, everything has a timing. And also you really, as a recipient side, you also have to have like a switch on and antenna radar on. Otherwise, everything just passes through. But for some reason or another, on that day, on that particular day, I guess my radar was on and it was switched on. And I really understood, oh, that's what four bodhisattvas vow means. We say sentient beings are numberless and we vow to save them all, free them all. But it's not possible to free them all as long as I save the person. But, when you keep deepening your practice, particularly Shikantaza Zazen practice, and you keep studying, you really start to have this sense of me versus others are starting to fade out. You really start to feel each and everything around, each and everyone around. For some reason or another, it's really deeply connected. And then you may even say they are part of you. Actually, they are you. So in another word, saving all sentient being is not like I save you, but it is almost like when my left hand is in trouble, my right hand immediately covers my left hand. So there's that sense. And I really understood what Enkyo was talking about was really about this four bodhisattva vow. So I thought, oh, okay, this is almost like a stop. I was really being on this side and running and on empty. Then this stop kind of pushed me and somehow opened the door into the understanding of entirety instead of coming from this individuality. So again, this line, going back to this sutra's line, I really feel very strongly personable. So I am sure many of you have this type of experience. Now I'm going back to the sutra and keep on going. Now he becomes Gautama Buddha's disciple. This is also yet another interesting academic point. This whole process of ordination, or taking precepts and ordination, is so complicated now, don't you think? And then you wonder sometimes, how did Gautama Buddha did this? And of course, in Gautama Buddha's time, of course, there was no organization, no rules and regulation. There's nothing. So, it's not only me who think about that. There's a whole bunch of academic persons and scholars digged into this. And this is the most current understanding. First of all, Gautama Buddha had a really strong skill of looking at the people and understand who they are. So of course, you don't have to ask any questions, for someone like him. And he always take those people in, not from a request from email. He just sees the person, meet the person, spend the time, and sees the quality. So therefore, what he says is, come, and then call the person as bhikkhu. Come, bhikkhu. And then Angulimala becomes disciple. That's the ordination. As a matter of fact, this come is a translation, very specific Sanskrit. It's eri, so eni. There's so many different ways in Sanskrit to say come, but this come is specifically the word Gautama Buddha used to invite somebody to become, let's practice together. So the whole system of ordination actually started this. Gautama Buddha says, any. And then Angulimala became a student. There's a portion of the Angulimala Sutta that also dedicates the change of Angulimala goes through. This is also very interesting. And also, this is very Dogen's writing, overlapping. So this is the country, Kosala, and the name of the king was Pasanadi, and you probably know this man, Pasanadi, King Pasanadi. King Pasanadi have heard the Gautama Buddha, he himself is hosting, recently took in this infamous serial killer. Now this is really dangerous. So many people really came to King Pasanadi, said, King Pasanadi, do something. This is dangerous for us. You are in the position you are supposed to, protect us. So King Pasanadi decided himself go to visit Gautama Buddha, where Gautama Buddha was hosted by King Pasanadi. And then on that day, Gautama Buddha is resting all the way back. So therefore, there was some jisha, personal attendant, came to meet King Pasanadi. And this jisha was such courteous and, with just one glance, you felt like very strong, deep sense of spirituality. Sawaki Roshi, Kodo Sawaki, Homeless Kodo, you probably know him. Also the book called Homeless Kodo, translated by Okumura Roshi. I'm sure all of you have read. And the Homeless Kodo Sawaki Roshi, always tends to give the people the impression he's like a roaring sound. Yes, he had a really roaring voice. In Japan, my teacher is Honda Tekifu Roshi. He's one of the last remaining direct disciple of Homeless Kodo. So I hear lots of stories about how Sawaki Roshi, Homeless Kodo used to be from my teacher in Japan. But interesting thing is, many people, without knowing who he was, if he was just sitting next to you, many people didn't know who he was. Of course, he was always wearing Buddhist clothes, so they would recognize, okay, he must be a Buddhist monk or priest. But then many people say, what you really felt was deep sense of silence from Koto Sawaki. I think that's some portion of the quality we end up somehow take it in. It's almost like everything we do, everything we have done really manifests in how we are right now. So therefore, this younger man who came to meet King Pasanadi was someone like that. He really delivered really strong sense of silence, very polite and very noble almost. So he takes King Pasanadi into this house and then, bring him to Gautama Buddha. And then King Pasanadi says, Gautama Buddha, I have heard you took this horrible guy, horribly violent, ugly, incredibly violent man. And people are really frightened, etc., etc. And then King Gautama Buddha says, well, King Pasanadi, then would you like to meet the person? And then King Pasanadi is a little frightened, but so that means you actually did to take him in, and you do live with this serial killer. And he says, a former serial killer, yes. And then he says, you actually have already met him. And then this is the person who took him into Gautama Buddha, and he's currently sitting right next to you. And then King Pasanadi was so surprised how much transformation really did. When we become a Buddhist priest, our external changes. I lose my hair, and then I start to wear something really odd. And then, external change happens. But in many texts, including Dogen's text, it is really important to have both external change and internal change. As a matter of fact, it's interrelated. Internal change actually brings external change, and also external change also helps internal change. It's almost like a dynamism of taking precepts. Our internal change in the our way of viewing the world and viewing our life and viewing the people around really brings to the point of, oh, that's what these precepts are talking about. And at the same time, very often we forget. We are human beings, we're really ordinary human beings, so we forget. So then written precepts actually becomes a bit like our guideline. It's almost like a marriage vow. After marriage, you are still being, keep on meeting lots of very attractive, talented people. And then you remember, oh, marriage vow. It's a bit like that. So it also works both ways. So this portion is very suggestive and very interesting. And then he continues to practice. I'm skipping some portions, but I just want to pull out this portion. At that time, they all lived by takuhatsu, begging alms. Of course, Angulimala, even though he shaves his head and his attire changes, he's no longer wearing that awful finger necklace. But he's a very, strikingly handsome man. He goes out to the town holding the elms, begging for meals. People recognize him. This is also very interesting portion of, Buddhist teaching of cause and effect. And how does it work with the Buddhist view of cosmology and how we view time? Buddhist cosmology is that, Dogen really talks about in detail in Shobo Genzo, Genjo Koan, and also there's a wonderful writing called Uji in Shobo Genzo. He really in detail talks about how Buddhist teaching views space and time. In short, in our personal, this karmic experience, time and space is fixed and also linear. But at the same time, let's say there's me here, and this is really, I feel When I touch, I feel. And I have thoughts coming in, something here, and there's some sort of emotion comes and it changes my, bodily sensation, etc. So this is a realistic experience. But at the same time, as you keep sitting and practicing and deeper and wider, you really start to recognize how empty this is. And particularly at this age, I'm 67, and I have lots of referential points now, how I used to be. And then, where is it? And physically speaking, I can really understand the Buddhist teaching of emptiness. And at the same time, this Buddhist teaching of emptiness is not nothingness, it is interrelatedness. Everything is interrelated and happening just right here, right here, right here, right here, right here. And as a matter of fact, something we actually have is only right here, right here, right here only. And this right here, if you really examine it, constantly changing. So therefore, actually, this right here is also zero. And same thing with the time. But as Dogen really in detail describes, this moment of emptiness, moment of nothingness, actually includes everything from the past, and includes everything, every single opportunities or possibility which will take place for the next moment. So that's the Buddhist teaching of causes and conditioning, causes and result. It's not like a causes here and result here, but it's actually happening simultaneously. And at the same time, we cannot escape from it in our true real experience. Everything that has happened is here now. So therefore, this portion is very interesting. What happens is he goes to Takuhazu. One day he meets this woman who's pregnant and having a very difficult pregnancy. And he feels very, very bad about this woman. Again, I think this is also a very symbolic metaphor about this woman is having a very difficult birth. And then but he doesn't know what to do. And he comes back to Gautama Buddha and asks Gautama Buddha, what shall I do? And then Gautama Buddha says, go back to the sister and tell her, since I was born, which means Gautama Buddha is telling Angulimala, Angulimala should go back to this woman and Angulimala tells this to this woman, since I was born, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. One explanation I have to do is this. By this truth is this translator's translation of one specific Sanskrit word, which should be probably translated as word of truth. This word of truth is actually the origin of Dharani. When you study Dharani, sometimes some people will just tell you, oh, Dharani actually means nothing and it's just a sound. And so you just, like voice training, you just say, no more sound. It doesn't mean anything. It's actually not true. We know a lot about the Indian Buddhism because of the last 150 years of all these peoples making effort to, dig in. Most of the Dharani now we know is from China, but it was also transliterated from Sanskrit and Pali. Now we can actually go back and then somehow find what it means. And when you actually see the meaning of it, you will be surprised. This is really utterance of belief or utterance of this gutsy feeling, or adoration or admiration or gratitude. So when you are so grateful about something, what would you say? You say, thank goodness. Or you may say, hallelujah, or amen, right? Don't you? I do. So Indians did too. So therefore, at that time, they said some specific thing which was collected into a line, and that was transliterated in Chinese to Japanese. So actually, this is the true word because you really meant it, you know? It's a bit like there's a moment in hospice work, we often say, before someone dies, there's 4 words you really have to exchange. This is very important. And those 4 words is, I forgive you, and please forgive me, and I love you, and also goodbye. So when you actually have that kind of conversation, you are really not saying, oh, I love you, right? You are saying, really from the bottom of your heart, from the bottom of your guts, you're really saying that word. That is this true word. So by this truth is not a really good translation, but again, I don't know how to translate this. All these texts are very difficult to translate. You really need a commentary. But anyway, so from the guts, you say this. Gautama Buddha tells Angulimala. But Angulimala says, oh, I really can't do that, Gautama Buddha, because if I say that, it's a deliberate lie. I killed people. And then Gautama Buddha stops and says, then Angulimala, say this. Since I was born with a noble birth, and this noble birth is a kind of strange translation. This noble birth meaning you turned, you stopped, and you turned, right? You heard Buddha's word, and something happened to you. It came to you, came to your heart, and for some reason or another, this teaching really turned you around. So therefore, this is, in another word, it sounds a bit like Christian language, but it's like a rebirth, as a matter of fact. It's almost like well, it doesn't happen so quickly, but retrospectively, when you remember how your life was like 20, 30 years ago, and now, yeah, this is like a totally different birth. So he says, since I was born newly with this new birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. So this is what the Christian would call power of prayer. And if you really mean it, right here, right now, and the meaning of what you did in the past actually changes. In Angulimala's case, all this suffering he went through, and all of suffering he actually cast it upon on the others. If it changes into this particular gutsy feeling, I really want the happiness for this woman, it changes. So it's a bit like, according to what Nara Roshi says, again, we keep on failing. Even though we take precepts, we keep violating precepts. But at that time, the moment I violated the precepts, the next moment you can change. So next moment, you bring yourself back into the precepts. The moment before you violated the precepts changes. Because of that mistake, you were able to come back to this precepts. So again, this is really a very strong connotation all over the text, but it's almost the time, so I just want to include the last portion of it very briefly. Of course, Angulimala will be killed by the people who are relatives of the people Angulimala killed. The story does not have Angulimala escape from this law of causation. But in this case, Angulimala does not reattack to these people who are throwing stone to Angulimala. Angulimala was discovered as a former Angulimala. People got very upset and people gathered and started to throw stone at him. And he doesn't resist, and he gets stoned. And several hours later, after he reaches Gautama Buddha's place, he dies. But again, this is also, dealing with a very important portion of Buddha's teaching. Buddha's teaching is not about becoming happier, better. It is really about, how do you say that, going beyond of this sense of division of this is a good time, this is a bad time. I am unlucky, I am lucky. But instead, you understand this is just right here, right now, right here, right now. And right here, right now, what you need to do is right in front of you. And it's not about this is better or worse than anything. All you need to do is just to sit and just take care of what's really wholesome right here, right now. So, this text doesn't describe, of course, what Angulimala was going through internally at that time. But again, by not reattacking the people who's attacking him, you already kind of know what he's doing in the last minute of his life. Very interesting text. We have a small group in New York. We call ourselves called New York Zen Community for Dogen Study. And in this group, I offer 3 lectures each week. And sometimes I pick up a Pali Canon, and I spend, recently we read Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Gautama Buddha's last 2 days, in detail described in this wonderful text, just packed with incredible amount of wisdom. We spent about 8 months unwrapping word by word. And then next one, I'm really thinking about maybe I should pick up either Angulimala Sutta or Stanipata for the group. So if you are interested, please continue to study Pali Canon. It's really interesting, Pali Canon. Of course, the challenge is writing is so arcane. So therefore, you may need to get used to how to read Pali Canon's language. But once you kind of open the door, it's so strongly emotional and it's strongly alive. And all of these, metaphors are just right here, right now in our society, in our community, in your life. So I guess it's time for me to wrap up. I'm sorry. I always say I'm a very quiet man in my life. But once I start to talk about the Buddhist text, I just can't stop. Please stop me. I stopped myself. Stop.
Thank you very much. Since we've gone over a little bit, I'm just going to give back the merit. But thank you very much. That was wonderful. I love knowing that whole story. I've only heard parts of it. So thank you. So we do this call and response. Lorna, will you do the response? May the merit of this practice.
May the merit of this practice
Benefit all beings.
benefit all beings
And bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thank you very much. And everyone check the chat if you can make a Dana donation. Thank you very much.